Well, now the government's plans for the year ahead were unveiled in King Charles's speech at the state opening of Parliament yesterday. Criminal justice reform, extra taxes on vapes and net zero were front and centre in the raft of measures. But Labour says it shows Sunak's government has run out of ideas.
What we have before us is a plan for more of the same. More sticking plasters, more division, more party-first, country-second gimmicks, and no repudiation of the utterly discredited idea that economic growth is something the few hand down to the many. In fact, today we reach something of a new low, because they're not even pretending to govern anymore.
Well, joining us now in the studio to give his thoughts on these plans, former Conservative advisor and CEO of Regenerate, Ed Boyd. Ed, morning to you. It was a kind of an interesting speech. Was it? Everybody's saying it was short on detail and policy, or there was no big punch there. Is that fair?
Yeah, fair enough. I think it's probably slightly more politics than it was policy, but there was kind of a bit of both shoved in there. Two big issues. First, criminal justice and crime, and second one on climate change. So first on crime, I think the Conservatives will be concerned that polling shows that Labour is more trusted on crime. That's never really been the case for decades going back. It's always a strong thing for the Tories. So they're going hard on that. There is a policy thing in there as well. They've got an issue, which is the prisons are full. And so the policy in there on this side of things is to say, right, instead of short sentences, which we know by every measure are ineffective, let's actually deal with the root causes of people's offending and give them community sentences and have a punishment element, which is, tidying parks, sorting out graffiti to try and make the country cleaner and better. So there's a bit of policy in there, but stuff like that is more political.
What do you think of the reaction in the House of Commons afterwards? Obviously, Sir Keir Starmer leading the debates about the King's speech. It really looked like a dejected front bench from the Tory side. Obviously, loads of calls from the opposition to sack Suella Braverman. Yeah,
there is. I mean, you can see at the moment, there is division in Tory ranks and there's division in Labour ranks. Tory side, it's connected with Suella's increasingly strong views when it comes to the marches that are going on in London at the moment and her rhetoric around stopping boats. And I think it just shows that there's the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, they're not kind of cohesive wholes. They're tribes that have come together with different perspectives coming from different angles. And I think both for Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, and Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, the biggest thing over the next year is how do you make sure that you keep your party together such that coming into the next election, it seems like a cohesive whole.
The speech, the King's speech might have been a bit dull, but there was quite a lot in there nonetheless. Has Sunak even got time to implement this before the next election?
Yeah, I think on some of the stuff I mentioned a second ago on criminal justice, he can definitely do some of that. But in part, it kind of depends when's the next general election. Some people are saying it will be in May, which really isn't that far away, or it can be as late as January 2025. So it really depends when he holds the next election. And probably there is a chance to bring some of it in because it had, I think, the fewest big reform ideas in there that we've had in for decades. So I think part of its ambition recognises the fact that we've probably got 1 year to the next general election and there is infighting in both sides of political parties, so it's difficult to get anything done.
What do you make of Sunak's response to everything that's happening in the Middle East at the moment? He certainly hasn't been one of the strongest voices. Obviously, from his party, we've had Suella Braverman, extremely strong and I would argue quite incendiary language. Keir Starmer seems to be the person that people are turning to either criticise or praise in his response. What do you make of what Rishi Sunak is or isn't doing to talk about the crisis in the Middle East?
So I think the first thing is, whatever Rishi Sunak says should happen in the Middle East, it's like a lighthouse in the desert. Like the decisions are going to be made in Israel, in Gaza, and so he's positioning him and Keir Starmer positioning for domestic audiences as much as anything. So it's obviously a huge humanitarian crisis, and it then has ripple effects locally with Keir Starmer having front bench resignations yesterday because he won't push for a ceasefire, and different views within the Conservative Party as well.
I mean, there is a sense that Starmer is ahead of the game on this in terms of that position. Now, not necessarily by his own design, but because those detractors around him have put him into that arena, as it were. You know, he's the guy that's immovable on this. He's the guy that's got an absolute cast iron policy in terms of things like the ceasefire. You mentioned there, Ed, frontbencher resigning. Is there likely to be more of that, do you think? I mean, the smart money says there might be one or two more that walk.
So there could be, and I think it depends. You know, we've got planned protests this weekend at the same time as Armistice Day and Remembrance Sunday. If tensions quell over the next few days and coming weeks, maybe this will die down as a domestic thing, not obviously what's happening out in Israel and Gaza. If things boil up, and this is just the beginning of local UK tensions, then it could get worse and worse and more difficult, especially for Keir Starmer to hold his party together on this issue with the kind of relatively strong stand that he has taken.
Well, Ed Boyd, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Still to come.